Hello, thank you for watching my video, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe and comment. King Aethelstan, who ruled between 924 and 939, is one of the most important men in English history. Grandson of Alfred the Great, son of Edward the Elder, and nephew of Queen Aethelflaed of Mercia, he certainly had family pedigree on his side. He is considered to be the first true king of England. This is a quick video on his reign. On the death of his father in 924, Aethelstan was declared king. Edward the Elder had fought to almost his last breath. Shortly before he died, perhaps as little as a few days, Edward was on campaign in Chester, which had risen up in revolt. Aethelstan had big shoes to fill, but he was now aged around 30, so, in theory, ready to succeed. As a young boy, Aethelstan had met Alfred the Great, who was fond of his grandson. On one occasion, he gave Aethelstan a spectacular cloak, belt, and sword. Perhaps in the young boy, Alfred recognized a potential king in the making. There was no guarantees Aethelstan would become king. Child mortality rates at the time were tragically high. Then, in keeping with Alfred's love of education, he had Aethelstan educated at the court of Aethelflaed and her husband, Aethelred of Mercia, his aunt and uncle. Here they kept a close eye on Aethelstan's progress, and he could hardly have asked for a better upbringing. There had been some question marks over Aethelstan's succession, as he also had a half-brother who ranked above him in the line of succession, but he died shortly after Edward the Elder had done in 924, so any potential problems were avoided, and Aethelstan was crowned the following year in 925. He quickly set to work subduing problem areas. York was still held by the Danes. Aethelstan made a marriage treaty with the king there, who married Aethelstan's sister, before the Danish king died in 926. Aethelstan then took his opportunity and took York. He then went further north and took Northumbria, before threatening the King of Scots with war if he didn't accept a peace treaty and Aethelstan's overlordship. The Scots king, Constantine II, agreed, although he would cause problems in the years to come. After his success in the north, Aethelstan's next priority was ensuring continued loyalty. In York, he razed to the ground there a castle that had been built by the Danes, so to impede any potential rebellions against him. Any riches gained from his military expeditions, Aethelstan made good use of. He handed over significant sums to his followers, or, being a pious man, to monasteries. This is a good propaganda move, as it established him as a generous man who rewarded loyalty, but was also careful not to enrich himself extravagantly. Indeed, monasteries were one of Aethelstan's priorities, building magnificent new ones and supporting aging religious buildings elsewhere with generous gifts. His piety reflected in his character too. He was kind and humble to all classes of people, whether they be clergy, noble, or people of the poorer classes. Physically, he was thin with flaxen hair. However, as mild-mannered as he might be, and he hardly looked the most fearsome man in the world, he was not a king to take lightly, as his enemies would one day find out. Aethelstan then turned his attentions back to the northern Welsh. After a meeting at Hereford, the Welsh rebels were then brought back into line and reluctantly surrendered to him. From there, Aethelstan moved across the southwest, extinguishing trouble and ensuring peace by building defensive fortifications like towers and castles. Athelstan's reputation was growing rapidly. The Norwegian king, Harald Fairhair, sent him a ship along with ambassadors to establish relations between the two kings. And the German king, Henry the Fowler, a great ruler in his own right, then asked for a marriage treaty which would see Athelstan's sister marry Henry's son, Otto, who later became known as Otto the Great. The marriage did take place in 930, and this was a prestigious match indeed. It should be noted here that Aethelstan remained unmarried, perhaps due to his piety, and so he bore no children himself. In 937, Athelstan's reign reached its peak with his most enduring and spectacular success at the Battle of Brunanburh. The Vikings had still not given up their claim on York, and in the years leading up to the battle, Aethelstan had led campaigns into Scotland, where apparently Constantine had been causing trouble. Athelstan's might was now so great that neither the invading Viking army, led by the King of Dublin, nor Constantine II himself could hope to beat him alone. However, an alliance between the two would give Aethelstan an altogether different problem. And so the Scots and Vikings united and invaded, sacking English territory. Aethelstan gathered his forces and the sides met at Brunanburh. After a fierce battle, the result proved to be a great slaughter. In fact, no greater a slaughter had been seen. Aethelstan was triumphant. The last great threat to his legacy had been firmly extinguished. He died just a couple of years after the battle in 939, aged around 45. It's difficult to say whether he was truly the first real king of England. There was still work to be done to fully unify the country that we see today. But Aethelstan, along with his predecessors, and not just his father and grandfather, but also those that had gone before, had laid the groundwork in the most testing of times. Viking invasions and troublesome neighbours, and it's worth noting here that the Scots and Welsh are not always the innocent victims of English oppression, as is sometimes insinuated or implied, meant that the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms may have remained fractious and divided were it not for Aethelstan. He put paid to all of that and ensured that England would unify eventually.